They never wanted you to find this. The ancient teachings that connected heaven and earth, soul and cosmos, were hidden, not lost. While the world taught you to chase success, Hermeticism taught how to become something greater, not just rich, not just powerful, but awakened. And at the center of this forgotten wisdom stands Hermes Trismegistus. For centuries, kings, priests and scientists sought his secrets, buried in the emerald tablet, whispered through rituals, encoded in symbols older than any religion. These weren't mere beliefs. They were instructions for transforming reality itself. And guess what? They were never meant for the elite. They were meant for anyone with courage to look beyond the illusion. Maybe someone like you, if you've ever felt the pull of something deeper, if you've looked at the world and sensed there's more beneath the surface, you're exactly where you need to be. And before we dive in, I want to invite you, not as a viewer, but as a seeker, to subscribe to this channel. Because what you're about to discover is just the beginning of a journey most people never even realize exists. Because this isn't fiction. This is a living legacy, a spiritual practice that guided minds like Newton, Da Vinci, and Jung. And now, it's your turn to remember what was once hidden, and why it matters more than ever. They say some names echo through time for a reason, and Hermes Trismegistus is one of them, a fusion of the Greek god Hermes and the Egyptian Thoth. This figure wasn't just a myth, he was the living symbol of Hermeticism itself. Picture a being who guided souls through the underworld and gifted humanity with the gift of writing, all while whispering secrets of the cosmos. He wasn't a man, he was a movement, a silent bridge between logic and divine wisdom. Now imagine this, in an age where most people were still figuring out how to farm properly, Hermes was said to be mapping the stars and decoding the soul. Not metaphorically, literally. He embodied the archetype of the eternal seeker, the one who doesn't settle for appearances. His role, to show that behind every visible truth, there's an invisible law. This was no ordinary spiritual practice. It was the blueprint of inner awakening. If you ever felt that hunger for answers, that there's got to be more whisper, you're not alone. That's the same fire that lit Hermes' path. He wasn't here to teach formulas, he was here to awaken remembrance. And while many speak of gods who ruled over men, Hermes Trismegistus revealed how man could rise to meet the divine. But his teachings didn't stop there. You've probably heard the phrase "as above, so below" tossed around like a cool spiritual slogan, but few realize it comes from the Emerald Tablet, the heart of Hermeticism, attributed to none other than Hermes Trismegistus. In just a few mysterious lines, this text shook the foundations of both ancient alchemy and modern quantum theory, and I'm not exaggerating. The message: there is no separation. The universe is a mirror, and you are both the reflection and the source. Now let that sink in. We're not just passive observers in this cosmic theater, we're participants, creators, interpreters. Hermes wasn't merely writing poetry, he was laying the groundwork for a spiritual practice that connects planets to cells, and thoughts to atoms. That same tablet tells us that transformation is our birthright. The lead inside you, your trauma, confusion, ignorance can be transmuted into gold. What's wild is that over 36,000 texts were once attributed to him. Most are lost, but what remains is enough to form an entire school of wisdom, deeper than any modern curriculum. His writings explored everything from the soul's journey to the cycles of the stars, from healing herbs to the laws of vibration. If you're serious about discovering who you really are, Hermetic texts are like maps, and the Emerald Tablet is the compass. Think about it. Ancient priests, mystics, and even scientists saw these teachings not as superstition, but as coded truths. Alchemists in the Middle Ages weren't just playing with potions, they were decoding symbols of inner transformation. Imagine using Hermeticism, not just to understand the world, but to change it, starting with your own inner world. The microcosm and macrocosm, that's not theory. That's your life in action. You don't need a temple to begin. Try this. When faced with confusion or chaos, stop and ask, what is this reflecting inside me? That one Hermetic question can shift your perspective entirely. It's a small practice, but a powerful one. You're not here to control the world, you're here to harmonize with it. That's what Hermes was whispering about all along. The world outside is a lesson in the language of your soul. And here's the kicker. Even the greatest minds of history fell under Hermes' spell. Newton had copies of Hermetic texts in his study. Carl Jung based deep parts of his psychological theory on Hermetic symbolism. This isn't fringe knowledge. It's ancient wisdom hiding in plain sight, waiting for you to remember what you've always known. A spiritual practice that doesn't demand worship, only awareness. But of course, even the most powerful ideas can vanish when forgotten. What happened to this sacred knowledge? Why did something so transformative fall into shadow for centuries? To answer that, we need to talk about a renaissance and a rediscovery that would shake the Western world to its core. It's almost poetic how powerful truths always find a way to resurface, even after centuries of silence. During the Renaissance, Europe experienced more than a rebirth of art. It rediscovered ancient wisdom buried under dust and dogma. Enter Hermeticism. Thinkers like Marsilio Ficino stumbled upon ancient texts and felt like they were holding lightning in their hands. This wasn't just philosophy, it was a spiritual practice that could awaken nations. Ficino didn't just translate these texts, he resurrected them. Imagine finding scriptures that claimed all religions shared a common origin, a divine truth whispered across civilizations. That's the essence of Prisca Theologia, the idea that all genuine spiritual paths point to one single source of truth, and who stood at the center of it all. Hermes Trismegistus, not as a god, not as a prophet, but as a cosmic librarian handing humanity the keys. The timing was perfect. The church dominated thought, but cracks were forming in the walls. Hermetic offered an alternative, not rebellion, but revelation. Instead of fear and sin, it spoke of light and transformation. Instead of blind obedience, it invited exploration. It was radical in the most healing way possible. Suddenly, Hermes wasn't just a myth. He was a spiritual ancestor. What's fascinating is that some Renaissance scholars believed Hermes was a contemporary of Moses. Let that sink in. They saw him not as separate from Judeo-Christian thought, but as a silent architect behind it, a guiding wisdom that ran beneath religions like an underground river. And the message that the divine wasn't locked in temples, it lived in every seeker's heart. And the ripple effects. Massive. Artists, alchemists, and mystics across Europe began weaving Hermetic themes into their work. Botticelli painted them, Shakespeare hinted at them, even the architecture of the time reflected Hermetic geometry, symmetry, sacred proportions, divine balance. The Emerald Tablet wasn't just being read, it was being lived. Tao. Imagine the spark that ignites when a soul feels it's touching the truth for the first time. That's what Hermetic texts offered. They didn't ask for faith. They offered tools. Tools to meditate, to understand symbols, to connect with the stars and the self. It was a wisdom that didn't just speak, it echoed inside people. And that echo was hard to ignore. But as with every great rediscovery, there was putback. Institutions don't give up power easily. And as the winds of reason began to blow stronger in Europe, something was about to challenge Hermeticism's return. The age of enlightenment was knocking, and it wasn't coming quietly. Every great wisdom tradition eventually faces a trial, and Hermeticism was no exception. For centuries, it had been revered as ancient divine knowledge, even believed to predate Moses. But then came the scholars with their ink-stained hands and magnifying glasses. When they dated the Hermetic texts, they weren't from the dawn of civilization as once believed. Instead, they were from Alexandria, written between the 1st and 3rd centuries CE. That revelation hit the Renaissance like cold water on a fire. Now let's pause. Does that diminish their value? Not at all. In fact, it makes them even more interesting. These writings weren't just ancient, they were hybrid. Crafted in Alexandria, the melting pot of Egyptian mystery, Greek logic, and Jewish mysticism. They were less about dogma, more about dialogue. The wisdom of Hermes Trismegistus was now seen not as static truth, but as a living fusion of civilizations. But the shift was enough for some to turn away. As modern science began to rise, anything mystical got shoved into the corner. Telescopes replaced temples, chemistry replaced alchemy, and with that, Hermeticism was quietly exiled from intellectual society. What once inspired Da Vinci and Galileo became dismissed as superstition. The spiritual practice that once sought unity was now labeled irrational. Yet, and this is the beautiful twist, truth has a habit of resurfacing. In 1945, in a dusty cave near Nag Hammadi, Egypt, a discovery shocked the academic world. Hidden scrolls, Hermetic fragments, teachings once thought lost forever. It was like Hermes Trismegistus himself left a breadcrumb trail through time, waiting for us to be ready again. And maybe, just maybe, we are. Think about it. We live in an era where people are questioning everything again: religion, science, reality itself. That's where Hermeticism finds fertile ground. It doesn't demand belief, it invites inquiry. It doesn't deny science, it complements it. Hermes doesn't preach from a pulpit. He whispers through intuition and symbols. It's a wisdom for those who crave more than answers. They want understanding. And maybe that's why the Hermetic revival is growing stronger today. From psychology to quantum physics, from mysticism to self-help, echoes of the Emerald Tablet are everywhere. Even best-selling books on manifestation and vibration unknowingly sip from Hermes' ancient cup. The teachings never died. They just changed form. Like any good alchemical process, they transformed under pressure. But rediscovery is just the beginning. What happens when ancient knowledge starts being used again? When secret teachings enter the hands of a world in crisis? To understand the rebirth of Hermetic spiritual practice, we need to look at those who never stopped using it. The secret societies who kept the flame alive in silence. Not everything sacred was meant to be shouted from rooftops. Some truths prefer whispers, and that's exactly how Hermeticism survived through centuries of silence. Secret societies, like the Rosicrucians and the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn, weren't just mystical clubs. They were sanctuaries, places where the wisdom of Hermes Trismegistus was practiced, preserved, and passed on quietly, intentionally, and away from the glare of empires. Inside these circles, rituals weren't just symbolic, they were transformative. Initiations involved more than robes and candles. They altered consciousness. Picture a novice stepping into a dark chamber, guided by chants, incense, and sacred geometry. Each symbol carried centuries of meaning. Each vowel spoken, an energetic vibration. Hermeticism wasn't read, it was experienced. And these practices weren't for spectacle. They were tools, precise and sacred. Spiritual practice here meant deep self-examination, ego dissolution, and realignment with divine order. Banquets weren't feasts for the flesh, they were reenactments of celestial harmony. Baptisms weren't just water rituals, they were gateways to altered states of awareness. Everything served one goal: inner transmutation. Even today, echoes of these secret rites live on in subtle forms. Ever tried breathwork, sound healing, or guided visualization? Much of that traces back to Hermetic initiations. The modern world may have changed the costumes, but the soul of the ritual remains. When someone chants Om in meditation, they're activating the same energetic centers Hermetic adepts aimed to awaken centuries ago. These groups also served another purpose: protection. In eras where deviation from religious orthodoxy meant exile or execution, secrecy wasn't a luxury, it was survival. Hermetic wisdom had to be hidden behind symbols, metaphors, and encoded language. That's why you'll find lions, serpents, suns, and pyramids in their manuscripts. They weren't decoration, they were instructions. So what can we take from this? You don't need to join a secret society to begin, but you do need intention. Sacredness isn't about smoke and robes, it's about your presence. Try setting aside time each week for silence, journaling, and meditation with a candle lit. You'd be surprised how quickly the veil starts to thin when you simply listen. Hermes Trismegistus always taught through experience. But there's more to Hermeticism than ritual. Behind the smoke and symbols lies a deeper map, one that divides the tradition itself. What if I told you there's not one, but two distinct paths within Hermetic wisdom? One technical, one philosophical, and the way you choose to walk it changes everything. Most people think Hermeticism is just about mysticism, but the truth is, it's a double helix of knowledge. On one strand, we find the technical, astrology, alchemy, magical operations, and ancient medicine. On the other, the philosophical religious path, contemplation, gnosis, and salvation. Hermes Trismegistus didn't choose one over the other. He mastered both, like a bridge between heaven and earth, one foot in science, the other in spirit. Let's start with the technical path, the hands-on Hermeticism. It wasn't superstition, it was a sacred science. Alchemists weren't just melting metals, they were mirroring transformation. Turning lead into gold meant turning ego into essence. Astrologers didn't predict your day, they mapped your inner seasons. Every planetary alignment was a metaphor for personal evolution. Today, you can still use this. Tracking lunar phases. For energy management, using planetary hours to align your actions with cosmic flow. Even herbal medicine finds roots in Hermetic correspondences. Want to dive in? Start with something simple. Learn your birth chart, not to label yourself, but to understand your energetic architecture. It's ancient tech for the modern soul. Now for the other strand, the philosophical and spiritual side. Here Hermeticism shifts from the stars to the soul. It speaks of divine essence within, the unity of all things, and the journey back to source. The corpus hermeticum, the heart of this path, doesn't give instructions, it opens your inner eyes. You don't follow it like a manual, you absorb it like a sacred conversation. These texts are meditative, poetic, almost dreamlike. They speak of the nous, the divine mind, and how humans are reflections of that cosmic intelligence. Think of it like plugging your spirit into the main server of the universe. You stop surviving and start remembering who you are and what you came here to become. Interestingly, the two Hermetic paths often intersect. A ritual without inner gnosis is just theater. A philosophy without action is just daydreaming. Hermes Trismegistus taught the integration, the fusion of practice and presence. He wasn't interested in hollow rites or cold theory. He wanted transformation, real, lived, embodied transformation. And so the question becomes, which path do you walk first? The ritual or the reflection? The fire of alchemy or the silence of divine contemplation? In truth, one leads to the other. But for those who seek, not just knowledge, but awakening, there's one concept that binds it all. A concept that lives beyond books, beyond symbols. It's called gnosis, and it changes everything. Gnosis isn't about collecting facts, it's about remembering truth, not the kind you read in books, but the kind you become. When Hermes Trismegistus speaks of divine wisdom, he isn't inviting you to believe, he's daring you to experience. This is what sets Hermeticism apart. The truth isn't taught, it's awakened. Gnosis is what happens when knowledge stops being information and becomes revelation. You don't learn Gnosis the way you memorize history. It comes like a flash, a moment where everything, your breath, your thoughts, the room you're in, suddenly feels connected. Imagine walking in a forest and realizing the trees are not just around you, but within you. That's the essence of this spiritual practice. It's not about escaping the world, but seeing through it. Many seekers use altered states to reach this. Meditation, chanting, breathwork, even near-death experiences have been reported as gateways. The goal isn't to trip out, it's to tune in. Hermes called it the awakening of the nous, the divine mind within. It's when you're no longer just a thinker, but a vessel for cosmic wisdom. There's a reason ancient initiates went through rituals of symbolic death and rebirth. Gnosis often comes when the ego steps aside, when the noise fades, when silence becomes louder than thought. Have you ever had a moment so still, it felt sacred? That's Hermeticism in action. You touch something eternal, and it changes how you see everything. Practical tip: start with presence. Instead of rushing through your day, take 10 minutes and do nothing. Just breathe, watch your mind, and notice who's watching. That subtle awareness behind your thoughts, that's the doorway. Gnosis doesn't come when you chase it. It comes when you listen. The beauty of gnosis is that it can't be given, but it can be remembered. It's like waking from a long sleep and realizing the dream wasn't real. Everything the Emerald Tablet speaks of, unity, reflection, transformation, becomes crystal clear in that moment. No preacher required, just stillness, intention, and the courage to look inward. But this kind of realization also raises deep questions. If we are divine reflections, why do we suffer? Why do we forget who we are? That's where the Hermetic view of soul and body comes into play, and it's more grounded and more liberating than you might expect. Some traditions treat the body like a prison, but not Hermeticism. Hermes Trismegistus saw no war between spirit and flesh, only misalignment. According to this wisdom, the soul didn't fall into the body as punishment. It descended with purpose. The body isn't the enemy. It's the stage, the sacred ground where divine potential gets tested, refined, and remembered. Unlike the Gnostics who rejected the material world, Hermeticism embraces it as a mirror. Every desire, pain, joy, and confusion we experience is part of the journey home. You came from a realm of light, a place of divine perfection, and you chose to forget, just to remember again. The spiritual path isn't about escape, it's about reunion. The soul doesn't hate the body, it needs it. That changes everything, doesn't it? Suddenly, Healing your body becomes a sacred act. Exercising isn't vanity, it's alignment. Eating well isn't just discipline, it's devotion. Hermes taught that balance between matter and spirit wasn't optional. It was the key to transformation. Want to start simply? Begin by listening to your body like you'd listen to a teacher. It always speaks. In Hermetic texts, the soul is described as a radiant light, temporarily wrapped in a veil of form. But this light forgets itself. It gets distracted by pleasure, fear, ego, and that's okay. It's part of the design. The fall isn't failure, it's fuel. Because the deeper the descent, the more profound the return. The journey is circular, from spirit to matter, and back to spirit again. That's why spiritual practice doesn't ask you to abandon life. It invites you to elevate it. The mundane becomes mystical when approached with awareness. Washing dishes becomes meditation. Speaking kindly becomes alchemy. In this worldview, every act can become a ritual, if done with presence. Now think of those moments when you've felt disconnected, tired, numb, hollow. That's not weakness. That's a soul in need of remembering. Hermes would say, be still. Remember who you are. Not in theory, in embodiment. That's why Hermetic rituals, symbols, and teachings exist, to help you reawaken your divine nature, right here in the dust and the noise. But there's one more layer, a secret the ancients held close. If the soul is to rise again, to truly ascend, there's a tool more powerful than all others. It's not hidden in temples or scrolls. It lives in your breath, your voice, your very word. And the Hermetists knew. Words don't just describe reality, they create it. Words shape reality. That's not poetry, it's Hermetic law. For Hermes Trismegistus, language wasn't just communication, it was creation. Every vowel, every tone, every syllable carried vibration, and vibration, according to Hermeticism, is the structure of the universe itself. To speak was to act. To name something was to give it life, or to strip its power away. Silence had meaning. Sound had magic. That's why Hermetic rituals placed such weight on chanting, vocalizations, and the sacred intonation of Egyptian words. It wasn't superstition, it was spiritual physics. Imagine speaking a sound that unlocks parts of your soul, a vowel that resonates with a planet, a chant that lifts you beyond the physical. This was more than ceremony. It was navigation. Through the cosmos, rituals weren't done for the gods. They were done for the self. To remember, to rise. In Hermeticism, climbing the planetary spheres was symbolic of inner ascension. Mercury, Venus, Mars, each one represented qualities within. As one mastered each level, the soul shed layers of illusion. The ritual wasn't performance, it was practice, inner transformation disguised as outer form. You don't need a pyramid or a priesthood to begin. Start simple. Light a candle. Speak your intention aloud, clearly, with reverence. Not for theatrics, but to remind yourself that your voice matters. Speak your truth. Declare your goals. Whisper gratitude. Even a daily affirmation, when spoken consciously, is a form of Hermetic magic. Your words are wands. Use them wisely. But Hermes wasn't naive. He knew language was double-edged. Words can elevate or deceive. They can bring people together or tear nations apart. He warned of mistaking written doctrine for living truth. Books are valuable, but only if they lead to experience. When you cling to scripture but ignore its soul, you lose the point. Knowledge, without gnosis, becomes noise. That's the paradox of writing. It immortalizes wisdom, but risks freezing it. Hermes Trismegistus likely never existed as a man, yet his words outlived empires. Why? Because they weren't just written, they were felt. They resonate because they remind us of something we already know, that we are the temple, that we are the ritual. That truth is not outside us, it speaks through us. And if death is just transformation, then maybe the true ritual is how we live, what we speak, what we create. Because when the time comes to leave this body behind, Hermeticism teaches that your soul won't be judged by creed, but by clarity. Did you remember? Did you evolve? And above all, did you use the divine gift of language to return to the stars? Death, to most, is the end. But to Hermeticism, it's a beginning in disguise. Hermes Trismegistus taught that the soul doesn't die, it transforms. Like a snake shedding skin, what we call death is merely the soul returning to the cosmos, ready to weave itself into new forms. There's no fear in that, only rhythm. The universe breathes, and so do we, in cycles far greater than this one lifetime. Imagine life as a school, not a sentence. You're not here to suffer and vanish. You're here to awaken, evolve, and return wiser. Each lesson, each heartbreak, each breakthrough polishes the soul. That's why Hermetic spiritual practice isn't about salvation through obedience. It's about realization through experience. The soul earns its wings by remembering it already had them. Now here's the part most traditions don't dare say out loud. You as a human being are a microcosm of the entire universe. Everything that exists out there, stars, galaxies, gods, also exists in here. Your body is a temple. Your mind, a cosmos. Your voice, a vibration that echoes creation. Hermes didn't flatter his followers. He challenged them. Rise, remember, reflect the divine. This is where real transformation happens. Not in escaping the world, but in realizing you are the world. That every act of kindness, every brave decision, every silent moment of awareness is part of the great return. The goal isn't to become something else, it's to become fully you, the divine version, the awakened version, the version that remembers its stardust and soul combined. But let's be honest, this isn't always easy. Sometimes, the pain feels too sharp, the confusion too deep. That's when you return to the Hermetic tools: breath, silence, ritual, symbols, and above all, gnosis. You don't need to conquer the gods. You need to merge with the divine, not as a servant, but as a reflection. That's how immortality is earned, through union, not fear. And once you understand this, fear dissolves. You're not running from death anymore. You're dancing with it, knowing it's just the next transformation. Just as the caterpillar doesn't die, it becomes. That's you. That's us. That's the wisdom Hermes Trismegistus carried through centuries. We are not here to wither. We are here to ascend. And so the real question becomes, now that you know this, what will you do with it? Because this journey isn't theoretical anymore. It's personal. And as the ancient emerald tablet whispers, that which is above is like that which is below. And if that's true, then your next step isn't just yours. It echoes through eternity. So now you know. The teachings of Hermes Trismegistus weren't fantasies. They were formulas for awakening, for transformation, for remembering who you really are. But the truth is, knowledge that isn't lived becomes just another forgotten scroll. The emerald tablet won't change your life. You will if you choose to walk the path. So I'll ask you, what part of you are you ready to transmute? What illusion are you finally ready to shed? Are you willing to go beyond belief and experience? Because this ancient wisdom was never meant to be admired. It was meant to be used. And the moment you apply it, even in the smallest way, you step into a lineage of seekers who dared to evolve. If this journey sparked something inside you, a question, a realization, even a strange sense of déjà vu, I want to hear about it. Drop your thoughts in the comments. What resonated most with you? What part felt like a forgotten truth resurfacing? Let's build this community of seekers, because the path is always clearer when walked together. And if you haven't already, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications. Here, we don't just explore knowledge, we unlock it. Together, one hidden truth at a time.